So I think this episode deserves quite a bit of background and setup. Melissa is here with us. One is just an amazing person, and our origin story really is based off of Melissa was a student in one of my master's degree classes, contemporary issues and exercise science. And as I told her before we got on, she's an excellent writer and also an excellent researcher, different topics. And Melissa has a big background, yoga, dance, things of that nature. And she just blew me away when she submitted some work in this master's degree class about yoga and VO2 max. It was like mind blown moment. And I was like, wait a minute. A contribution of VO2 max through yoga. So we're going to talk about that. But first, I want to say, Melissa, thank you so much for spending some time with me today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me here.
So I think what will help set this up too is for the audience to understand your considerable background in the topic, and just so everyone gets a good idea what you've been up to for all these years and how we've gotten to this point.
Okay, well, thanks. So I actually found yoga through my professional dance career. I was a trained ballerina and I danced professionally for over 10 years. And then that led me to leading my own dance company, a choreography project, where I toured around the United States making ballets for different companies, as well as having my own Bay Area based ballet company. In my first master's program, I had a peer in my cohort who taught yoga, and she was encouraging me to come take a yoga class. And I was a little bit apprehensive because I had taken different styles of yoga before, and I just didn't really think that it fit like the way that I viewed exercise and mindfulness. And she was like, no, 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 just come take my yoga class. So for background, her yoga class was a vinyasa style dance yoga class. And I loved it because it had so many nuances of dance styles in it. It was in a heated room. There was a sense of community. There was like great music playing. And it just, I went into the experience wanting a workout. And I left the experience with a surprising work in. And ever since then, I have been such a huge proponent of yoga and the ways that it can not only offer a physical practice, but what it can do for the body, the breath, and the mind.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I've yoga has been kind of in and out of my life throughout 25 years. I've always had a tremendous respect for it. And I think, for the purpose of this discussion, which is students and colleagues and clients, the majority of people have, I would say, a pretty a narrow view of yoga. I would say a focus is something that, a mind, body, spirit based practice, but also not thinking about it as technically, and this ties into what we're talking about, a workout that contributes to increasing oxygen consumption to improve VO2 max, which is essentially a gigantic metric of decreasing all cause mortality and longevity practices. And so I wanted to get an idea of how did you come to this with start thinking about like getting this research, because I had never seen this research before. And that's why when more background, I give feedback, a lot of feedback in my classes, and I was writing or speaking to Melissa. I'm like, what is this? Like, this is surprising to me, and this was the start up there. So let's talk a little bit about that. How you discovered this?
Well, yoga is a tool for adaptability. So the body wants to adapt. And when we move with intention and breath and awareness, and we repeat those patterns consistently, then the body recognizes itself around balance and efficiency. So VO2 max is just one measurable expression of that. Um, I like to tell my students all the time that the body's primary job is homeostasis.
Hmm.
So we're continuously recalibrating to keep us balanced. So yoga asana, yoga pranayama, meditation, those are just essentially structured conversations that we're having with adaptive systems. So when you practice consistently, your breath, your nervous system, and your muscles, they all learn to respond more efficiently. So my research is really targeted around the homeostasis, the physical adaptations that yoga can provide. And I think a lot of people that haven't practiced yoga consistently, haven't found the right yoga teacher, the right yoga space. They're coming into the conversation of yoga with some preconceived notions that might be a little dated, or that structure just around something kind of like slow and not
Yeah.
aerobic enough. And there is such a wide range of yoga out there, especially like within the past 10 years. We've seen such a boom in the yoga industry. And so I think a lot of people are just coming in with, I don't want to say like a negative connotation, but maybe not like an accurate understanding about like how yoga can support them in their aerobic and cardiovascular goals.
Yeah, I'm gonna say, I think a lot of people have. My speculation is a lot of like movie yoga, and
What's
it's kind
movie
of.
yoga?
I'm gonna explain. It's
Okay.
almost a yoga you see in a movie that is just extremely gentle, and it's very much more like a meditative version of it, not necessarily something that you would see that is, for the purpose of this conversation, more dynamic, that is pushing cardiovascular endurance for that. I never see in a movie, that's why I call it movie yoga, where it's like, wow, that looks a little more intense than it looks just more just relaxing more than anything and not pushing cardiovascular endurance on some level to it. It's just what I always see in a movie when it's like they're on vacation or something like, oh yeah, movie yoga. I'm like, type of thing.
Well, you're giving me like Lillian Fullin PBS
Yeah.
1980s vibes right here. That's
Yeah.
like what
Yeah.
I'm getting from that. And
Yeah.
actually, I'm gonna contradict that and say
Okay.
that that is just one small component of yoga, and there is like such a boom
That's
in the
right.
yoga corporations that are out there. I mean, I know I've taught for them, and um, there is just a huge interest in what yoga is offering right now.
Yeah.
And there's all these like hybrids of yoga too. Like we see a lot of like yoga with weights, yoga
Hmm.
fusion, different things like that. So, and this is a big discussion between yoga teachers and exercise fitness teachers too, because a lot of what we see in those sort of like big box corporation yoga studios is it's moving towards more of exercise and moving
Mm.
away from the spirituality component of what yoga really is. And I think like in the West, what we practice is called an asana yoga. If you were to go to different parts of the world, they're practicing more of a spirituality yoga.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of kind of like cross messages being sent about yoga. But let me tell you, you can increase your cardiovascular rate by taking a yoga class. And I know because I've taken them and I have taught them. So,
So tell me, so explain to the audience um that concept, like what, because they're probably thinking, okay, maybe I haven't taken a yoga that does push more cardiovascular endurance. How would you describe that version of yoga and what that would be like?
well, a lot of times too, we're also thinking about like a heat component too, because
Right.
a lot of what people are doing now is like a hot yoga.
Mhm.
So just like a 60-minute or 90-minute class by itself can be taxing, but then you put in that 95-degree heat, that 105-degree heat, that 40% humidity, and all of a sudden you are working out. So when I talk about like what's happening in yoga, there's also this component of pranayama. Okay. So pranayama is connected to asana, and asana in Sanskrit literally means seat. So when it started out, physical postures were just meant as a reason to prepare the body for pranayama and for meditation. Okay. Now, what we see are these like huge variations of what asana can be. And a lot of over time, especially within the past 30 years, there's been this physical activity, gymnastics, kinesthetics, like military-based exercises that have been integrated into yoga practice. And a lot of that we see is in the asana known as Surya Namaskars. So when people do sun salutations, so like 7 to 11 or 12 poses, and you're moving through a sequence, a dynamic sequence, and every pose is connected to breath. And then we have this pranayama component, which is pranayama in Sanskrit. If we break it down, prana means life force, vital energy, aka breath. Okay. And ayama means extension or expansion. So, what you're literally doing, people think like, oh, you just come to yoga and you breathe in and out. That is not what you're doing at all. Okay. In pranayama, it's about controlling the breath. It's about internal regulation of the movement of the prana through the breath. And when you do that, all of a sudden you're improving your VO2 max, you're increasing your endurance, you're reducing perceived exertion. At the same time, you're improving recovery after exertion. So when you combine breath with movement, the body learns how to stay calm under load, and that's in a way an emotional resilience. So you're doing all these amazing things for your body through physical activity, through breath.
That's amazing. That's so awesome. Well said. I definitely have some questions following up with this. So I want to come back to what you said, but I want to also make sure we get into the research, especially the research that was presented to me within the course, because I thought that was really interesting. And so, talk a little bit about that research. And in addition to that, an addendum is in terms of these studies, what is the significance in terms of improvement of VO2 max? What percentage or amount of improvement can we expect based off of the research that we currently have that you presented in there?
Sure. Let's talk about the first study. So it was yoga, pranayama, VO2 max, and aggression in swimmers. Okay. So this study is by Renu and Manikam, and it worked with 50 competitive swimmers from Kerala, which is a west coast town in India. And these were young athletes, so groupings of 18 to 21. And none of these individuals had had any kind of prior yoga experience. So the researchers divided them into two groups. We had a yoga group and then a control group. And the yoga group practiced asana and pranayama, so our poses and our breath retention. And they did that for 5 mornings a week for 8 weeks. And the researchers measured three variables within that study. They measured aggression, VO2 max, and then flexibility. And so what they found was not only did aggression go down and flexibility increase, but they found a significant increase in the swimmer's maximal oxygen uptake. So the researchers explained that this happened because of the pranayama training. So they reduced re their resting oxygen consumption. They lowered the heart rate for the same workload that the control group was getting. They improved their lung efficiency and breath control, and they enhanced oxygen extraction at the muscular level. So, in essence, yoga made swimmers more efficient, it made them more calm, and it made them psychologically adaptable. So, all extremely important for competitive athletes. I mean, all extremely important for any individual. I mean,
Yeah.
the one we're behind driving on the freeway, like we would all benefit from a little bit of yoga.
We need less aggression on the highway, right?
We do. And I just think that like breath itself is just so interesting. I love to tell my students like we're taking anywhere from 22 to 24,000 breaths a day. Okay. And those are all involuntary. Like we're not even paying attention to it. And the times that we are actually thinking about our breath are in silly moments when we're giggling and we're like,
Yeah.
I can get my breath, or like somebody startles us and we go, oh, and we lose our breath. Okay. But what yoga teaches you is to be mindful about your breath, to take steady inhales, steady exhales. And as we move through a pranayama practice, there's all these like cool ways that we can manipulate our breath. But 95% of us are just like, we're just up here. We're just
Yeah.
chest breathers. We're short, shallow breaths. We're not even getting to that like diaphragmatic awareness. And so I think what was happening here in this study is that we see swimmers increasing their VO2 max just by increasing their awareness of their breath.
I wonder, so funny, we're talking about VO2 max, but the aggression part actually really tripped me up.
Yeah.
That and what I mean by that is like, what was the motivation for studying that? The aggression in swimmers. That's curious to me. I mean, but really important, I think, you know?
Well, the authors explained that pranayama and the asana, it shifted the nervous system towards that parasympathetic
Yeah.
dominant. So they were going into kind of the rest and digest instead of that like
Mm.
fight or flight symptom. And when they did that, it lowered the heart rate, it lowered their psychological arousal, it
Hmm.
reduced, it better regulated their emotions, and then it reduced that sympathetic fight or flight activation. So aggression didn't necessarily just go down, but it was like a measurable reduction in their physiological and psychological tension that they might have felt like before a big race or something.
Yeah. Okay. Gosh, that makes so much sense. I love that study, actually. It's just so, I mean, when you presented that, I was like, what? It's not often I'm presented with something I'm like, I literally have never heard of this before. It was amazing.
Well, there's another cool study too that I brought to your attention,
Yeah.
okay? And so this one's a little bit like more, I would say, known and famous. So it was about long-term yoga improvement with VO2 max and fitness in adults. So this study is by Udon, Vankaday, and Fatale, and it's one of the largest yoga and physiological studies out there. So it actually had a big sample. It worked with 200 adults ages 30 to 50 who practice yoga 1 hour per day, 6 days a week for 6 months. Okay, quite the commitment. And the yoga sessions included asana, pranayama, and meditation. And they looked at several cardiorespiratory markers. So they're looking at like their PFI index, their physical
Mhm.
fitness index. They're looking at VO2 max. They're looking at BMI and weight. They're looking at the basal metabolic rate. And they measured and found through a validity test that after 6 months of yoga, VO2 max increased by 14%. A very meaningful shift
That's
for
significant.
adults.
Yeah.
Yeah, for adults not training in sort of like a high
Right.
intensity exercise
Yeah.
regimen. So why did it increase? Why did it increase? Well, the author cited that it improved yoga improved muscular endurance. It increased the oxygen extraction. It provided better blood flow to working muscles. There was a reduction in the vascular tone from the parasympathetic activation, and it increased efficiency of the respiratory system. So, in
Mm.
other words, yoga improved the economy of the
Mm.
cardiorespiratory system.
Man, I'm telling you, that's mind blowing. And I'm going to say why, because the traditional idea of improvement of VO2 max is very much linked to your more high intensity based exercise, or also like your 2 to 4 minute interval range, where it
Yeah.
may start a little easy. And then by that last minute, I mean, you're struggling pretty hard. And I think the significance of that is a different pathway for achieving a similar result because clearly there's many ways to get to a similar point. And for a lot of people, a more high intensity activity, whether it's biking, whether it's running, whether it's any high intensity based resistance training work, is not attractive to a lot of people all the time. And so often I see a lot of people not engaging in VO2 max based training because one is just incredibly painful and not attractive to a lot of the population. So this to me, what drew me was like, oh, another pathway that is probably actually more digestible to a larger population, larger percentage of population. Speculation, all speculation for that. But I don't know. What do you think of that?
I just think that there's a component to yoga that we haven't really addressed that much. And I think the reason why people see an increase in it is because it is a body, breath, and mind
Yeah.
exercise. And so when individuals are in a yoga class, there's a community setting.
Yeah.
Okay. In yoga and Sanskrit language, we call that our Sangha. We're part of a community. There's motivation from others. We're very close, mat to mat.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of things that are happening psychologically within us that are being motivated by the words that the yoga teacher is speaking. So there's like years and hundreds of years of philosophy undertones behind this sort of westernized modern workout that's happening. And a lot of times people are connecting to these philosophical elements just through the simple practice of these asanas. Okay. And one of the things that people are connecting with is something called tapas. And no, it's not an expensive small plate of food that you get at a restaurant. Okay. This is known as our discipline or our austerity. Okay. It's literally my favorite thing in the world that I tell my students all the time. It's commitment. It's doing the thing that you said you were going to do long after the mood that you set it in has passed. So there's a commitment that's happening because it in your yoga practice because strong looks different in yoga. Okay. It's not like going and lifting a bunch of weights or like running for miles and miles or biking for miles and miles. It's the ability that at any point you're standing in a pose with your arms out and you could just drop your arms and go get French fries or go text message a friend or something, but you don't. You stay committed in this pose and you push yourself to the edge. And that's what's happening through that, this psychological connection that's expanding everything within you from a physical, the basis, lowest level physical gross body, all the way through your subtle bodies. And so I don't know if I correctly answered your question. I do want to just talk about the component of the psychological connection that's happening within yoga that's really important. And that's why we see people continuing. That's why we
Yeah.
see people making a difference physically with VO2 max consumption and expansion, and also in terms of like aggression, like in the first study
Yeah.
people are shifting their way that they're looking at themselves, and
Yeah.
that's helping that the way that they're looking at others. Because what's happening on the mat, all that good stuff, you take that out in the world, and then that's what helps you not freak out when you're sitting in traffic.
Yeah, yeah. I think I'm gonna get back to the question part a little bit, but I think that's one of a larger benefit of exercise in general is in addition to that is it helps you become hopefully if you're doing a consistent practice of exercise should make you feel better inside your body, outside your body and better and become better to other people in your life through that practice. We've often associated the practice of any exercise or movement with just a very physical outcome for this instead of an outcome that's more holistic for that. And I think back to the question a little bit, you did answer, you added a lot of layer to it, which is great. I think with the pathway is people haven't seen this why is at least interesting. I can only speak for myself and my knowledge, just observationally, that the most people I know, they don't look at yoga as something that will improve their VO2 max. They're not entering into it going, I'm doing this practice because it's going to actually add to that. This is again just the group of people I know and my observation.
Yeah.
It's always looked at as I'm going here to like center myself, kind of a meditative practice, but and they're not looking at it as this very large, like 14% change. That's big. That's actually really big. And so I think turning that, you could actually get even more people into it if they saw that aspect to it as well, the VO2 max, because you're going to get a lot of people who are like exercise physiologists. That's what they're looking for, that type of aspect too. I think that has a massive ripple into participation and of people who may not come to the practice through maybe more traditional means, but like, hey, I can improve my VO2 max and get these other benefits. That's amazing.
Yeah, better breathing, better stamina, calmer nervous system is exactly what that research is
Yeah.
capturing and indicating when we see VO2 max improvement.
Yeah.
And the exciting thing is that yoga just doesn't like make you more flexible or more
Right.
peaceful. It literally can make you more aerobically efficient.
Yeah. And that to me is that's amazing. Because I had never really associated that myself, the aerobic efficiency, but it's another great uh, benefit of yoga practice that has not been promoted. And just in my space, for 25 years, I have known tons of people who have taught yoga. I've hired yoga instructors for clubs I've run. Not one yoga person has ever talked about aerobic efficiency in my time with that. And I think that language, that talk, actually will speak to a lot more people who are into that aspect of exercise.
Yeah, I mean, yoga is a structured aerobic exercise program. And if it's not being portrayed that way, then it needs to be marketed that way more. And I
Yes.
hope this conversation, this discussion that we're having can ripple out and more individuals can understand that this is occurring through yoga,
Yeah.
pranayama, and meditation.
I totally agree. I wanted to come back to something because I was just curious about your thoughts about this. You had talked about the Western aspect of
Yeah.
yoga, and I know a lot of people have a lot of feelings about, yeah, I think you know where this is going, the spiritual nature of yoga, the intertwining of that and the practice and the spirituality versus maybe, as you said, about kind of the removal of more of the spiritual practice, but more of just the exercise. What are your thoughts? Is this positive, negative? What are you feeling about this? Neutral?
Oh my gosh, we could spend hours, years talking about this. The dialogue is so nuanced, and I think when it comes down to it, the best thing to do about this conversation is to educate yourself. So
Mm.
if you're unsure, it's important to have a base understanding, like what we practice right now in our westernized culture, like that is not yoga. Like yoga, the the timeline of yoga is even the conversation of it is completely challenged all the time. Is it 10,000? Is it 7,000? Is it 2,000 years? I mean, literally what we practice now in our westernized culture, it's about like little over 100 years. Okay.
Okay.
This is when yoga was brought to the West, and it was brought by Indian philosophers that were helping us at a time when a lot of us were seeking sort of new ways to look at the world. But we have luminaries like Krishnamacharya, Patabi Joyce, BKS Iyengar, and these individuals created an offshoot of asana-based yoga. And over time, it's taken on this nuances of gymnastics, calisthenics. We see high to low planks, like in military type
Yeah.
activities. Okay. It's manifested so much. And with that, a lot of the roots of yoga have gotten lost. So we've lost the philosophies of yoga, and it's progressed into something more modern, exercise based. Okay. But the long answer to your question is, if it works for you, then there's something in there that's important, and you should listen to that. And if a teacher of yoga, it's their duty, it's their responsibility to be educated in where yoga came from and also the way that yoga adapts based on what the culture needs. Okay, so if a good teacher is able to bring in what worked in the past, but what's presently needed for the future, for the present student, then they're doing the right thing. It's honoring the roots, but at the same time staying relevant and present to what the community and the culture needs in the present moment.
Well said. Man,
Oh, thanks.
just like class, just like in class, I'm telling you. I'm curious what your thoughts are on why, I mean, this is a big question, why the spiritual aspect of yoga has become less and less over time in Westernized versions of yoga.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I think and sitting here like as like a white woman who's
Mhm.
never been to India, never studied with these, type of guru type individuals. I think there's a lot of fear of appropriation.
Mm.
I think there's a need to respect the past of it, but also when you are teaching a class, and I know you know this through, and
Hmm.
hopefully the listeners too, that have taught any type of physical activity class, okay, there is a lot of things going on, okay? You are not just teaching a class to one student, you're teaching a class to 25, 40, 60 students, how many are in your class. That's a lot of bodies that you are taking care of. There's a lot of physical alignment things that you are trying to support your students with. There's the music, there's the clock, there is your peak pose that you're working for. There's a lot of like pins in the air that you're juggling. And I think a lot of times teachers get stuck on teaching the physical aspects of it. They let the physical poses drive the yoga car
Right.
instead of letting other aspects like pranayama, meditation, philosophy, those things work themselves in. So I just think it takes a skilled and experienced teacher to find a way to make a well-rounded class that can that can be a cornucopia of all of those things. And sometimes, things get left out. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, a lot of times the things that get left out are the philosophy aspects of it because you're trying to support the student and the student's there because they want to work out. They want to work out. And it's
Yeah.
your job as the teacher to also help them, like I said in the beginning of this, to find a work in.
Yeah. What about the certification organizations for yoga? Is the curriculum indicative of one that has the spiritual practice within it, or is it non-spiritual practice based?
That is such a fantastic question. So there is one large governing board of certifications for yoga teachers. It's Yoga Alliance.
Hmm.
And I am a certified Yoga Alliance teacher as well as running a school that offers a yoga teacher training 200-hour certificate. And that governing board is exceptional about having students that are teacher trainees to become a teacher, having an education that's well-rounded, that's checking all the boxes when it comes to asana, pranayama, teaching techniques, anatomy and physiology, yoga philosophy. And I do have to say that as somebody that leads all of those classes for my teacher trainees, students, as soon as they learn about the philosophies of yoga, lifestyles, and ethics, they're so enamored by it. It's so deep. It's like I
Mm.
tell my students, these are all the things that they're talking about in these philosophies, like through the ancient texts, like the
Mm.
Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Like these are all things that we feel inside that we've learned along the way, and somehow we just need to be reminded of them. And that's what these ancient texts do. But again, a lot of times, new teachers, young teachers, they have a hard time finding a way to integrate those themes into their physical asana-based classes and these sort of like big box corporation
Yeah.
students.
It's so amazing. It's interesting, right? I mean, it's as someone who's been in exercise for a long time and as a professor and stuff, I actually spend a lot of time in like certified personal trainer courses that I teach at various colleges on philosophy, because I actually think it's a huge part of the practice of whether you're a personal trainer or group exercise instructor. But we're so focused on the exercise physiology aspect of it, which is great, which is totally great having baseline information for that. But we don't often talk about the philosophy related to oneself, your own practice, how you show up to your sessions with clients, and also teaching clients about philosophy and different forms of philosophy, whether it's, in this version, pragmatism, naturalism, axiology, metaphysics, all these different things are important. And my thought process behind why students may love the lifestyle, ethics, yoga part, because it speaks to becoming more human and how to become a better person through yoga. And I think all exercise should be uh, an instruction on how to become a better human being for that, for the practitioner, for the instructor, all those things. But we often try to push that away from the curriculum quite a bit. in lieu of let's talk about chronic adaptation, acute adaptation, the Krebs cycle, electron transport, again, which are important, but it often is in lieu of actually spending a lot of time on the self improvement part for that. So I love that. I've always loved that about yoga. I was just curious how much of that was a part of the curriculum.
Definitely a part of it because when it comes down to it, yoga is about yoking. It's about a union. It's about understanding more about yourself. And when you find out about yourself, then you can show up and be better for the individuals around you. And I think we can all agree that no matter what the workout is that we're picking,
Yeah.
we always feel like a better human being. We always feel like our bigger capital self after that workout.
100%.
Everything else that we were bringing in, it doesn't feel as drama or important afterwards because we're clear-headed. We've moved stuff around, we've shifted all those thoughts and those emotions. I tell my students all the time, if you have that thought loop going through your head, take a deep breath in, just sigh it out, and that's going to help move that thought through.
Yeah, I mean, you're speaking a huge truth here. I'm telling you, when I was in college many, many years ago, whenever I would have some conflict in my life, and I was a collegiate athlete, so I was already working out, but I would also go to the recreational center at my college and I would work out, and I always felt so much better afterwards. Whatever was bothering me was essentially no longer an issue for me. And I remember I realized that so early in life that this has an incredible medicinal approach here, this thing that we're doing. And it continues to be so beneficial for me in my life and sounds like obviously for you and your life. And what an incredible impact you've had through your work and dance and yoga. And now, as an educator and someone going through school, you're going to continue to have an incredible impact in the lives of a lot of people, Milissa. I appreciate that about you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for giving me some of your time and being open to doing this. Um, just really amazing. And I can't say for the audience, I can't say enough good things about Milissa. I've taught the classes she was in, I've taught 8 jillion times, I swear. And she was one of the most memorable people that has ever gone through that class. I was just endlessly impressed from day one through the last day in the class. You were amazing.
Thank you. Well, hopefully, we can continue the research about the impact of yoga and VO2 max and continue the conversation. And so more individuals can understand about all the great things that are happening with yoga and aerobic capacity.
Most definitely. Thank you so much for your time, Melissa. Appreciate you.
Sure.